Jo, great to see you. How does it look to you at the moment?
Well, we've said it before, Adnan, it's crunch time. It's crunch time, but I think this time it really is. I mean, as you said, time is running out. And it's running out not just because Britain's time to leave is on the 31st of December. Any deal that is agreed between the EU and the UK has got to be ratified by both the European Parliament and the European Union and by the UK Parliament. So, you can see why the tension is really mounting. You've outlined very clearly the three main sticking points. And it's interesting because towards the end of last week, I think negotiators on both sides were quite hopeful that a deal might be struck. But then things seemed to go, belly up, if you like, over the weekend. So we're really now into crunch time. I mean, there's a summit in Brussels on Thursday and Friday this coming week. And I think the hope was that if there's any deal, it's got to get to that summit. We have to wait and see.
As soon as anyone warns of possible negative consequences of a no deal, or even indeed of what's being called a thin deal, it's shot down as Project Fear by people who voted for Brexit. It's almost impossible, Jo, to foresee the future. But who do you believe when you see these different analyses of what might happen if there is a no deal?
Well, I'm talking to you actually not from London, Adam, but from Kent. And I live about 20 miles from the Channel port of Dover. And in Kent, we are very used to our roads and our motorways being absolutely clogged up with lorries when there's been bad weather or strike action or anything like that that's hampered ferry crossings to and from Britain to France. So all around here, we are fully expecting that come January the 1st, we won't be able to move. They are building massive car parks. They're talking about thousands and thousands of lorries being stuck in queues because of the delay to border. The other thing that we are hearing on the grapevine is that many international hauliers will give Kent and the Channel ports a wide berth for a couple of months until the new process for border checks and controls beds down. Well, that means there are going to be shortages. I mean, shortages of food, shortages of medicine, shortages of car and other mechanical and engineering parts. There's also going to be price increases because there's a cost implication to hauliers who are facing these extra checks. And we heard this morning Gordon Brown, the former British Prime Minister, and before that, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, warning that Britain is actually facing a massive trade war, an economic war with the United States. Now, we know that President-elect Joe Biden is much keener on the European project than his predecessor, Donald Trump. So I don't think that Boris Johnson's hope of getting a trade deal with America, which he might have got with Trump, is looking quite so hopeful with Biden in the White House.
Again, Jo, I always like to bring these stories down to how it affects a family, for example, everyday life. There have been so many warnings, and you've indicated some of them and the possible negative repercussions. The British government has been indicating that it's going to actually lower its standards for the first possibly 6 months after December the 31st for monitoring the way products come into the United Kingdom. People have said that organizations like the Mafia or Eastern European criminal gangs are looking forward to that. You remember the case a few years ago when there was lasagna being sold in British supermarkets? It was supposed to be beef and it was actually horse meat. What do you think the chances are of criminals getting involved here if there is a relaxation because the British government in a no-deal scenario simply can't handle what the new reality is?
Well, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest because, as you and I both know, criminals are much quicker off the mark than politicians, and they're probably much better prepared, certainly than the British government. I mean, I was just listening before we came on air to a former cabinet minister, and actually he's a local politician here in Kent. And he said, businesses are desperate. They don't know what the plan is if there is no deal. They know roughly what they might have to do, but we are so behind in the preparations. I think there is very, very little faith that the government has got the ability, the resources, and particularly at the moment, we're all across the world fighting coronavirus. Surely that should be the number one priority for governments around the world. And it was a perfect opportunity for Boris Johnson to say back in the spring, we all need to focus on this. We don't need to be focusing on, goods and tariffs and things like that. I mean, you can see the pictures there, Adam. That's what Kent looks like. And that's, in the past when we've just had a temporary delay at the Channel Tunnel or in Dover. So that will be like that from January onwards, I think. Businesses, I think, are failing and suffering, and they've already had the double hit of coronavirus. I think it's going to be an absolute, an open goal for criminals. And I think, there's no way that it can be policed properly, because we've got, quite rightly, to have our eye on the other ball, which is dealing with coronavirus.
Jo, thank you so much indeed. Always a pleasure to have your analysis. Jo Phillips, political journalist in Kent, not in London. Take care.